Hey dudes, this is B Junior from Endurance Productions coming back at you with another set of videos in the My Thoughts On series that I'm doing now from time to time. Today I'm going to get into some George Romero goodness, just take our time doing it, kind of give you my insight, a little more background on what I think about this set of movies. And just to reiterate from my first My Thoughts On series from the Scream trilogy that I just finished up recently, the reason or the big push for doing this type of video versus just doing reviews on just individual selections was mainly because a lot of these movies that I want to talk about are within a set or a series or a trilogy, and what I'm getting at is a lot of them are classics and they've been reviewed countless times, and I don't know exactly what I'm going to be able to say that's going to be different than other reviews. So what I'd really like to do on a lot of these is just pick a certain set of movies, like I've told you before, and just kind of go through them, tell you my thoughts on them, my recollections of them as I go through, kind of a diary, if you will, of a video series on a certain set of movies. Today I'm going to get into a good old set of movies that no self-respecting horror buff should be without in their horror collection. None other than the George Romero zombie films. Get a little drink of water there. You're like, man, I didn't tune in to watch you drink water, man. What's on? Shoot. Guys, George Romero's directed, I guess it's how many now? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, actually, just 6 zombie movies of his own, if you don't count the night remake of 1990, which I'll touch on briefly in this little series as well. I just threw it in for good measure. George Romero. Let's just start with the man himself. George Romero, to me, has always had a few different kind of rankings. He's just John Carpenter to me is just an all-around great filmmaker. George Romero has different categories I think that he falls into. And don't get me wrong, I respect the man for what he does and the films that he's made, the body of work basically. I wouldn't go so far as saying he's a hit and miss director. I think I can watch just about everything he's made. They're watchable. Even the stinkers are basically watchable. If you have to watch them. So, in my opinion, first of all, George Romero, I give props to him mainly because he made so many of his first films by that group family atmosphere efforts. Now, as opposed to what he's doing now, and we'll get into that later with his films, that atmosphere is what I've always loved about independent filmmakers. They basically just borrow, steal, kill. They get anything they need to make these movies, and they took their time with it. And plus, it was a different era back then in the 70s and that type of decade where they had a lot of drive-ins still around, independent movie house owners. Now they're all owned by chains, and it's basically just how much money you have that translates to how many screens you can put the movie out on, and how many distributors, palms you can grease to get them to put it out in their movie theaters. So, that goes without saying. But back in the day, George Romero just had that knack for being able to get together with different people that he trusted in the Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania area to make his first few films that just turned into utter classics. They may or may not have done a lot of business, a lot of them, or didn't skyrocket in terms of millions of dollars. But over the years, in terms of rewatchability, it's the classics. A lot of his first films that just people want to go and watch them every year at Halloween, or horror movie buffs. They want to have them in their collection so they can watch them over and over again, or introduce new viewers to it as time goes on. Get a little water here, guys. Excuse me. Again, no editing. Nothing but the best drinking of water in endurance production videos. But guys, getting back to it, just kind of full circle talking about George Romero as a whole. George Romero as a director, in my book, is very good. As a writer, he's very good to excellent. As an editor, he's excellent. It's like I said, he's not like Tobe Hooper to me, which Tobe Hooper's always been very, very much hit and miss, sort of like Wes Craven. Can make a hit and make it very well, but it can also make a very bad stinker. George Romero's not like that to me. Like I said, even his stinky movies that a lot of people don't like, the crazy, a lot of people give the crazies a bad rep, Martin and movies like that. I kind of like them for what they are. I mean, I don't put them up there with my favorite horror movies ever, but I've always been able to watch those movies if I just want to watch something different. And I'm kind of like a George Romero completist, sort of like my John Carpenter collection, where I just have to have a little bit of everything that he's done. So, that's why I say even his stinky movies are at least watchable, but they're probably not going to have high rewatchability factor. I'll just say it that way. Okay, getting back to the movies at hand here, as of course I dropped the info earlier that he's directed in his, I don't know whether you would call them zombie epics or zombie catalog rather. Zombie catalog sounds good. Zombie catalog, he's got 6 films under his belt, and 7 if you count the Night of the Living Dead remake, which he was kind of the producer, the driving force of the movie. He didn't direct it, Tom Savini directed it. I'll touch on that as we go. Let's dive right into it, guys. Let's talk about the immortal classic, Night of the Living Dead. Okay, I have here the Elite Entertainment Millennium Edition, which a lot of horror buffs swear by, not because of its a multitude of special features, which it doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of it on there. It's just that it's finally the one that George Romero has kind of sanctioned as the all-purpose go-to edition. If you just want to know his thoughts, he does have the creative team behind the movie and himself on an audio commentary on this one. See, the big problem, I think the good starting point with the classic from 1968, Night of the Living Dead, good starting point is the fact that George Romero, I don't care what anybody says, I've got to just say this because I've always felt like George Romero was a great filmmaker, but he was not that great of a businessman, and even to date, he's not that great of a businessman. That's just my feelings towards him. Mainly because a lot of the business deals that he's made over the years with different movie studios, or choices that he's had to make because of poor decisions, or mainly because what might have been things that weren't his fault. A lot of the problems that came along with budgetary constraints later with some of his late 80s flicks, and but the point I'm trying to make is Night of the Living Dead always had something bad going against it after it was finished and put out there for the world to see. It's that there was a contract flaw. I believe I did a little research, and I've heard about this from many different horror buffs out there. Night of the Living Dead had a contract flaw where certain royalties for the creative team, the actors, and even the director, George Romero, didn't see hardly next to any money after this movie came out. And it was basically deemed to be public domain, which means if you are a movie distributor or later a VHS or a DVD distributor, just about anybody can acquire the license to this movie and release a big old assembly line of your version of the Night of the Living Dead. Hence all the versions we've had of this movie over the years. We've had a colorized version on VHS and DVD. We've had that goofy other edition that has I think the gray cover with the little girl's face on the front, where it's supposedly the edition that you're supposed to buy. But the only problem is they went back and added scenes into it and chopped the movie up. I don't recommend that version. I've tried to watch it a couple times. It just doesn't work. Go for the original, and I recommend the Millennium Edition if you're going to buy it. Mainly because, I don't know, I haven't heard too much about the Blu-ray yet, but this one is THX sound and picture certified. Also has been kind of deemed to be the go-to edition by George Romero himself. But, like I was saying, it's public domain. If you got the money, you can put this movie out. So it's one of those deals where it was just, it left a bad spot in the hearts and minds of the creative team and the actors of this movie for years thereafter. And it wasn't until 1990 when they tried to do the remake, which was moderately successful, that they tried to get some of those royalties back by doing a remake, but doing it right with having George Romero behind it and Tom Savini. We'll talk more about that later. Night of the Living Dead, an immortal classic. Like it or not, this movie is known worldwide It's been around for, decades and decades. It's not my favorite in the series, which I'm going to get shot for saying that. A lot of people say if you don't like Night the best, you're just not a horror movie. Screw that. I'm sorry. I'll get to my favorite in a little bit. But Night of the Living Dead, you can't deny it. It's a trendsetter. It's probably not the first quote-unquote zombie movie ever, but it is the one that set in motion the type of, you know, accepted zombie that we all know. All the generations to come after that of people that go, moviegoers, that kind of accepted what a zombie is, a lumbering dead person that's come back to life to either eat or attack the living or whatever, bludgeon them with implements or whatever you want to call it.